Star Wars: The Nightmare from Yostin, Prairie. Written and narrated by Wyatt J. Coonan. Prologue. A long, long time before the galaxy knew the name Skywalker, the Sith were their own empire. They built their own armies, commanded their own warships, and trained Sith Knights to match the Jedi. When the Sith Empire challenged the Republic, the Jedi and the Free Galaxy fought back, shattered the Sith Empire, and drove the Sith Knights into hiding. The Sith Empire could be destroyed, but the dark side could not. Carlota didn't know where she was. It was against the rules for her merely to walk out the door at night without a grown-up, let alone get in a speeder with a complete stranger. Grandma and Grandpa had given their permission this one time, but still she felt as if she was breaking the rules. Her family had acted as if their goodbye was forever, but surely that was wrong. Her parents would never allow that. Everyone had been acting weirdly since the alien woman in the white cloak had first showed up. The grown-ups had been so happy to see her that they'd made tea and brought out treats and sat around the living room table and talked with her for hours. Grown-ups always talked a lot when they were happy, and they'd said, "Carly, would you come in here, please?" Carlota's mother had ushered her into the room, and the alien woman's face had been so strange that Carlota had closed her eyes and cried, but after enough coaxing, she'd opened them again, and found that the alien woman wasn't so scary after all. They'd played games. Games like, "Which toy is special?" or "Guess what number I'm thinking?" Then they'd both sat still and closed their eyes, and the alien woman had kept saying, "Clear your mind," and "Think about nothing." And although Carlota had no idea what that meant, they'd assured her she was doing it very well. That had been a long time ago, long enough for Carlota to forget it. But then the alien woman had come back. This time Carlota wasn't afraid of her, and talked with the other grown-ups a little more. And then the other grown-ups had pointed at the alien woman and said, "Go with her, Carly. Trust her and be safe. We love you." So now Carlota was sitting in a speeder, humming along the prairie with the alien woman. The horizon dazzled and haunted Carlota, being so dark and so far away. And she heard singing, but it was a low, moaning, wrong kind of singing. "I hear monsters," she whimpered. The alien woman eased the speeder to a stop and looked around. "Indeed," she said coolly, "I hear them too." That made Carlota wonder. Of course there were monsters in the dark, but no grown-up had ever admitted it before, and soon she could see them. Pale, glowing eyes set in triangular heads stared at her. Long, low bodies crept through the prairie grass on 4 legs. The alien woman stood up, and Carlota clung to her skirts. "Hold tight, little Carlota, and you will be safe." Grown-ups only ever called her Carlota and not Carly if she was in trouble. Her fear deepened, and she gripped the alien woman as tight as her little hands could. Then the alien woman spoke, but she was doing something more than speaking. She wasn't shouting, but somehow it was the clearest thing Carlota had ever heard, because it felt as if there was a third ear inside her head, and that third ear was hearing the words clearest of all. "Hunters," said the alien woman, "move along. You will find no easy prey here." And the monsters listened. They turned their heads the other way and slinked off through the grass. "You made them go away," Carlota marveled. Then, with no ill intent whatsoever, "Are you part monster?" The alien woman laughed, a sweet, singing laugh. "You could say that we all are. It is nothing to be afraid of." She tried to sit back down. "You may let go of my legs now, child. I need them." Reluctantly, Carlota let go. "The monsters went away because monsters do not control their feelings, but Jedi do. As long as you control your feelings, you can always bring peace where there is none." That night on the prairie was Carlota's earliest memory. Chapter 1. Del Horace had done his best. For years, things had been good. His work at the dry cleaner's shop had paid him enough to get out of his parents' house and live on his own, and fate had taken pity on him and dealt him a sabbac hand. He had met Kriana there. A girl better than he deserved, he'd always thought. As it had turned out, she was indeed better than he deserved. He had always fancied himself a responsible drinker. "Name one time I've been drunk," he had always said. Eventually, Kriana could name a time. Then 2. Then 3. The birth of their daughter was supposed to change everything. As soon as he had learned Kriana was pregnant, Del had poured all his booze out onto the lawn and promised himself to forget about drinking. 3 years sober. Those were the hardest, best years of his life. But little Scylla's earliest memories of her father would be colored by drunkenness, because the bottle had never stopped calling to him. One night, after Kriana had yelled at him and forced him off the bed, then his boss had shouted at him for one lousy mistake, Del had decided he deserved a break. Life, he had thought, owed him that much. That was when everything had gone downhill. First, Kriana had vanished, with no one able to find her. She hadn't left a note for Del, which didn't surprise him, but she hadn't left one for Scylla either, and that shocked him to the bone. It had shocked him so hard that he had kicked alcohol a second time. "I am all Scylla has left," he'd told himself. "From now on, no more excuses. No more mistakes." For 2 more years, he had stayed sober before he fell off the cart again. Then more off and on drinking, and while he'd been busy trying to get a hold of himself, Scylla had been growing up without him. She shared his house, but in many ways lived alone. Alcohol was a mean mistress. It never let him get away with anything, and all morning it had punished him for last night's drinking. For a few hours, he had even doubted he'd be sober in time to go to work tomorrow. But as the poison cleared from his system and bleak reality set in, he had a moment of clarity. He hated to admit it, but Scylla deserved the truth. "Scylla?" he called. He was met with silence, but he was sure that Scylla was in her room reading something. "Scylla!" he tried again. "I'm in here." So she was still home. Del got up, was relieved to find that his head no longer hurt, and made his way to her room. He knocked as he opened the door and saw his daughter sitting on her bed. Nature had been kind to her. She grew up short but pretty, with her mother's nice features and tea-tan skin, but with his straight, thin black hair and narrow, razor-sharp eyebrows. Now that she was 15, boys were overdue to start noticing her. Del did his best to feel proud of her, but seeing her now filled him with sadness. She did not look up at him as he entered, but pointedly kept her eyes glued to her device. Her head bent down, her lips pouted, and the arm that wasn't holding up her reader wrapped tightly around her waist. She was the picture of a wronged, bitter adolescent. Del's friends had assured him this was normal for her age, and maybe it was, but Del had the creeping feeling he deserved it. "Hey," said Del. "What?" asked Scylla, still not looking at him. "You know, I haven't been doing so well lately." That was his euphemism for his drinking. "And I really thought I had it this time, but—" In a moment, he knew he would lose the nerve to say it, so he blurted it out. I need you to hide the money. Now Scylla looked up at him. What? I'm just gonna drink it away if I get my hands on it, he said. So please, put it someplace where I won't find it. We need that money for the house, and food and that sort of thing. But when I'm not doing well, I just can't help it. It's your money. Her tone was bitter and sarcastic. Not all of it, he said. She quirked up one of her eyebrows. What do you mean? I know you've been working after school. So what if I am? It's my time. I can do what I want with it. Yes, you should. And you're working, and you're earning your own money, and that's great. It all came out in a rush. I'm proud of you. He looked at the box on her shelf where he knew she kept her savings. But I'm worried I'll have a moment of weakness and take it sometime. I don't like admitting it, but there it is. You should keep it in a bank. Don't know how, Scylla murmured. It's okay. I'll take you there. We'll find out together. Dad, she groaned. I'll figure it out, all right? Just leave me alone. Okay. He halfway closed the door. I love you. As he left the room, he watched her for a response. She did not say anything, but she looked at him in a way that wasn't scorn or resentment. It wasn't pity, either. It was something warmer. It looked like she was on the cusp of saying, I love you too, or maybe, I want to love you. That was good enough, Dell thought. He had driven his life into the ground, there was no denying that. But maybe Scylla was set up to do a little better. Scylla, what's the matter? Asked her friend Rennie. Rennie crouched over a crate of food supplies, checking them for mold and then sorting them on the shelves. Rennie, the good-natured Twi'lek girl who had worked here with Scylla, made more conversation and did significantly less work. Scylla didn't mind the talk. It's my dad, she growled. Oh no, has he done something? Has he hit you? Let me see. Rennie's hand gently ran under Scylla's chin and tipped it up to inspect her face. Scylla did not stop her. Okay, no bruises, she said. If I ever see bruises on you, I swear I'll go to your dad and kick his butt myself. He makes me so mad because he doesn't do that. Wait a second, what? Rennie tilted her head. Scylla, that's backwards. Scylla plunked down the tuber in her hand and sat back. He goes and drinks away all the money. I have to pull all the weight. I have to figure everything out on my own. And then what does he do? He tells me he's proud of me and says, I love you. Is that bad? He makes things so hard for me, and then he says that, like it's supposed to make everything better. It's just not fair. Rennie peered into Scylla's eyes for a long, pregnant moment. What? Demanded Scylla. You believe him a little, don't you? No, I don't. I think you do. The way he is, when he says he loves you, you believe it. And then you can't hate him, even though you really want to. Maybe. It doesn't matter. I don't care. You should tell him, ooh. Rennie's attention immediately went to the front of the store, where Norrin Cowles walked in. He was Twi'lek, red unlike Rennie's blue, and ever since meeting him, Rennie had frequently quoted an old Twi'lek wives' tale that red and blue made a good mix. Scylla had to admit, Norrin was handsome enough that she noticed him too, human or not. Instantly, Rennie was at the register, chirping to Norrin about how good it was to see him. Scylla had time to peek into the other boxes of product and see what they held, purely out of curiosity. She slid open the next box, and a sweet, spicy scent washed over her face. She saw bricks of some light brown substance that, when she brought them to her nose to sniff, were too pungent to put in any food. What is this stuff? The label said it was soap. Instantly, Scylla was embarrassed. To most people, this was probably ordinary soap, and this heavenly, spicy smell was just what they expected. To Scylla, soap was the buttery, gummy stuff they bought cheap at the farmers' markets because they couldn't afford better, because Dad drank and she was paid scraps. and here she was handling the good stuff for everyone except her to enjoy. It was ludicrous. A stolen speeder mattered. A destroyed house mattered. But how could anyone fault me for wanting to wash with decent soap for once? She peeked over the counter to see the owner of the store, Gens, a tough woman in her 40s, crouched over a table, punching prices into a computer. She wouldn't notice a thing. Quietly, Scylla slipped a bar of soap into her pocket. Then another one while the opportunity lasted. Then a third. After all, she deserved a good break. Life, she thought, owed her that much. Gens did not sit up and scream, "Stop, thief!" Rennie did not stop chatting with Norin, and he did not stop flirting with Rennie. The planet kept turning. Scylla put the rest of the soap where it belonged, and wore a straight face for the rest of the day. Knowing that she was hiding stolen goods did not thrill her like she had thought it would. But it would be worth it just to enjoy something nice, whether people thought she deserved it or not. As she headed for the door at the end of her shift, she thought that she was already feeling a little grimy, and a good shower would hit the spot. "Scylla," said Gens, "come here for a moment." Scylla put on an immaculately innocent face and turned around. "What's in your pocket?" "Just my stuff. Why?" "Show me." "Gens, is something wrong? You never act like this." "Show me." "It's private. You really don't need to—" "Show me!" Gens's voice could punch like a Gamorrean. Scylla scrambled for another lie to tell as she pulled out one of the bricks of soap. "I bought this for home," she tried. "Then why are you trying to hide the other two? Think you can sneak out of here with 3 bulges in your pocket shaped just like bars of soap?" "I paid for these, honest." "Let's just go see." Gens turned to the register, and Scylla very nearly ran away. But Gens knew where she lived, and she was an exacting woman. She would call the marshals, they would come and investigate, and then Scylla would have to hide the soap. But then again she realized she could do that, and as soon as they left, it was too late. Gens came back from the register, her face surly. She made a shovel with one hand and thrust it at Scylla. "Give them back! All of them!" Scylla gave them up. "Get out of here! And don't ever come back!" "What? But it's just soap." "If you think you're allowed to take my things just like that, then I've got no use for you. You'll never work for me again." Scylla choked on a curse. Gens leaned down so their eyes were level. "You know what else? If you had answered me and told me the truth the first time I asked, I would have let you off easy. But you lied," she harumphed. "I double-checked, and you doubled down. Now go, and don't ever do that again." Scylla ran home. Standing all day had made her feet sore, but she pounded them on the dirt roads anyway. When she got back, the house was all to herself, and she smashed her backpack down on the floor, threw her things to every corner of the room, and narrowly resisted the urge to tear the backpack in half with her bare hands. "Soap!" she snapped. "Not a mansion, not a mom, I just want some blasted soap and they think I don't deserve it!" Just as her mother had rejected her by abandoning the family without a word, Gens had thrown her out too. Scylla sat against the wall, pulled her knees up, and let her head droop. "Just soap. Just some blasted soap." She repeated the expletive a few more times. It didn't make her feel better, but it gave her a kick, a burst of energy, and that was something. Then it occurred to her. Her last payday had been a week ago. Gens owed her for the final week she had worked. She had been robbed. She stood up. She would not let this stand. She would get what she was owed, one way or the other. Stealing the soap hadn't given Scylla the thrill she had expected. But now, as she plotted her revenge, she felt that thrill. After what she was about to do, Gens would regret ripping her off, and she only needed one person's help to do it. Norin slouched against a storage shed, smoking with his male friends. Rennie was nowhere in sight, so this operation, so to speak, was a go. "Scylla?" said Norin. Didn't think you were off work this early. He held up whatever he was smoking. You want one? Scylla put on her most fetching smile, which was easy to do in front of him. Actually, I have something to offer you. Listen to this. Gens fired me when she still owes me a week's pay. She tried to wash her hands of me and push me aside, just like that. Norin's face fell in sympathy. But I've got a way to get back at her, said Scylla. I know the way in through the shop roof. It's a code lock, and it's only 3 numbers long. I know her, and she won't get around to changing it for a week at least. Norin's friends had stopped smoking and listened with rapt interest. Norin noticed this and made a show of looking at Scylla sideways. So what? So, I can get you inside the store, and then everything there is free money. If you promise to give me a cut of what you find, I'll give you the access code. She mixed in a little more honey. You know, I wouldn't make this offer to anyone else. Those words worked magic on the boys. Norin's friends catcalled or punched his shoulder, and he looked conflicted for a moment. But only for a moment. He grinned and said, Let's do it. I'm your man. Meet me out behind the milk bar, tonight at sundown. Scylla had no need to investigate the place. She knew all there was to know. So instead, she gathered what Norin would need to pull it off, then sat on one of the seats behind the milk bar and waited. The owner came out to ask if she was ready to order, and she politely declined. A short while later, the owner came out and asked again, a little more pointedly, and Scylla understood that she would either be paying or leaving, and she couldn't afford to pay. Fair enough, she supposed. Gently, she excused herself, got up, and hid in an alleyway across from the street. True to his word, Norin came looking for her, and she flagged him down. Are you excited? She asked. This is crazy stuff, he laughed. I've never done anything like this. She put on her winning smile again. A brave guy like you? You'll do fine. Now the hard part is going to be getting in and out. I put a footstool up by the garbage can, use it to get up to the roof, and then take it with you so you can get back out of there the way you came in. I don't need to do that, he said. I can just smash the door in. He flexed his arms to make the point. Are you crazy? Do you want everyone on the block to know we were here? Oh, he deflated. You want to drop in and climb out. Trust me, I know the place better than I know my own face. Go for the crystalline treats, 'cause those are the most expensive, and they're not too big. And don't get greedy. Just fill your pockets and get out of there. How can I get into the cash register? Leave the register alone. What? He raised his voice above a murmur. Why? Shh! Scylla peeked out of the alley to make sure no one had heard that. We're trying to send Gens some message, not put her out of business. The treats will be plenty, trust me. The code to get in is 192. Okay? Okay. She rubbed her hand on his shoulder. Go get him! He walked across the street, full of arm-swinging, chest-puffing confidence. Clearly he was still not getting the point of stealth, but he got away with it, and made it to the back of the store without raising suspicion. He got the first part right. He stood up on the step stool, and with remarkable flexibility, he eased himself up onto the roof. But then he left the stool where it was. Grab the stool, Scylla whispered. Come on, you big lug, grab the stool! But it was useless from across the alley. The access code she'd given him must have been good, because his face lit up with victory as he hauled open the top hatch, and then, Scylla's heart clenched, he dropped in without the stool. Scylla ground her teeth. This was already going worse than she'd imagined. She had to suppress every impulse to go in there and do the job right. It occurred to her that she should have done that from the beginning. But it was too late now to do anything except watch and wait. And with no windows to peer through, she couldn't really watch. The late evening turned into the dead of night, and Scylla felt more and more conspicuous where she was. If someone were to see her crouching in the alleyway, they would have immediately assumed she was up to something criminal, purely because she was poor. She just knew they would. Loud noises started to come from inside the store. Scylla didn't want to believe it, but soon there was no denying what she was hearing. Norrin was moving furniture to get out. The metal feet of the stools and desks inside the grocer's scraped across the hard floor, and Scylla heard it as if it were scraping over her own bones. And soon there was a problem. Someone was awake in a house not far away, and she heard him talking urgently. Short sentences, lots of pauses, no questions. He was calling the authorities. She felt a surge of hope as the top hatch of the building banged open, and Norrin climbed out holding a sack of something. But then the man who'd been talking did the worst thing he could have done. He burst out his door. He saw Norrin, because Norrin was forgetting to be stealthy, and immediately he yelled, "Hey, you boy! What do you think you're doing?" Norrin slid down from the roof, landed in a painful-looking tumble that spilled a few crystalline treats from his sack. Then he took off running. The man ran after him, and it looked like an even race, but then they passed under a lamp, and Scylla saw a blaster in the man's hand. Oh no! Horrible images came to her of Norrin shot dead on the ground. This was completely out of control. Around a corner, the man aimed and fired, and Scylla could not see, but she could hear Norrin flopping to the ground, crystalline treats scattering everywhere. But something did not fit. That sound hadn't been a gunshot. It had been a stun blast. So Norrin would be all right. Or maybe not. A few minutes should have been all it took for the man to drag Norrin off someplace. But instead, he sat there, and soon a speeder came murmuring down the gravel road, and off stepped a tall Nikto man in a brown leather jacket who marched, not walked, down the street to where Norrin lay. "Son," he said in a firm but mumbling voice, "put that gun away." He walked under the lamp, and the light revealed a broad-brimmed hat with a distinctive flag sewn into the crown. It was the flag of the planet Yostin, but with a beige line underscoring it, the symbol of a Yostin lawman. The man with the gun obeyed him, and they started talking. It was only a matter of time before they started looking around and found her, so Scylla set herself up like a track runner and prepared to leave as quickly and quietly as she could. The two men turned and faced away from the alley where she hid, and she saw her chance. She ran. She got away with it. She bolted home, through the shower, and into her bed. There, the blazing energy in her chest kept her awake for a few hours, but then a crushing exhaustion put her to sleep. When Scylla heard a knock on the door, she tried to ignore it and keep reading. When her father got up to answer, she tried not to dignify the conversation by listening to it. But she couldn't stop herself. Silently, she eased open the door to her room so she could eavesdrop. On the other side of the door was the lawman's voice, unmistakably recognizable from her botched caper the other day. He was saying something about a burglary. She didn't hear all of what he said, but she heard her father retort, "My daughter would never do that." She should have celebrated, but instead she felt a pang of shame. A month ago, she realized, she would indeed never have done that. But my life went into the garbage, she thought. What else was I supposed to do? When her father closed the door and walked past the doorway to her room, he looked at her with a face that said a lot. There was pain in those eyes. It pained him that anyone would think Scylla was guilty of something, but there was also something else, and Scylla knew him well enough to know that part of him suspected her. But he did not ask about her job, or about any crime, or anyone named Norrin. Instead, he just said, "The sheriff was knocking. Wanted to know if I'd seen someone, that's all." So her father had shielded her. "Thank you," she wanted to say, but couldn't without looking guilty. Besides, she still felt the shame of being overestimated. She kept her lips pursed, looked down at her book, and tried to shut it all out. There was another knock. "Now what?" Scylla said out loud, and her father got the door again. And once again, she recognized the voice. It was Rennie. "Hey, Mr. Horace, can I talk to Scylla, please?" She smiled, but Scylla recognized the serrated edge on her tone. Her sweetness was phony, and there was hurt underneath. But her father did not pick up on any of this. "Scylla," he called back at her, "you've got a friend here." There was no ignoring this. With a deep breath, Scylla put away her reader, kicked herself off her bed, and trudged to the door. Rennie did indeed look sweet and innocent, so much that Scylla almost doubted her earlier fears, but she could still sense the simmering tension underneath. "Scylla, I haven't seen you in a while. How are you doing?" "Since you got fired," were the words Rennie left unspoken. "Don't worry about me." Scylla did not know what to say next. Since when did you come to my house? We always talk by the river after school." "I just wanted to talk to you." Scylla accepted that if she did not indulge Rennie, she would force her to speak her grievance out loud, and neither of them wanted that. "You can come to my backyard. It's nice there." Nice was an exaggeration, but there was grass and ferns and a little pond, a corner garden where they grew their own food, and a fence for privacy. Rennie, of course, was too preoccupied to care about any of that. As soon as they got on the lawn and closed the house's back door, she got into it. "What did you tell Norin?" She said it quickly and heavily, as if it were an unbearable weight that she'd just set down. "What are you talking about?" "Come on, Scylla, you know what I'm talking about. Norin broke into the grocery store just yesterday. He never does stuff like that. Did you know he was going to do it?" Her eyebrows pinched up as she said it. She had not come here wanting to start a fight. She was hoping that the answer would be no, and they could hug and make up and leave as friends. But Scylla couldn't bring herself to lie, not to Rennie. So she dodged the question. "Is that what he told you?" "Yeah, and you were talking to him to make him do it, weren't you?" "It's okay to talk to people." "But you were talking to him without me." Now it became clear. When Rennie said talking, she meant something much more potent and dangerous. She meant flirting. Scylla folded her arms. "There's no way he told you that." "You're right. He didn't. But I could see it on his face. Stay away from him, Scylla. You stay away from him, all right?" Scylla shrugged her shoulders. "All right." "That's it? Just all right?" "What do you want me to say?" "How about sorry? How about, I'm sorry I was talking with your boyfriend and then got him thrown in jail? How about that?" To call Norin Rennie's boyfriend was a stretch, but rather than say that, Scylla looked at the ground. "Just let it go." "You did, didn't you? And you won't even admit it!" Rennie's face crinkled with rage. You're just awful!" She turned and stormed off. It was the last time Rennie spoke to her.